I'm Daniel Carter, 38, a structural engineer from Portland, Oregon. My wife, Emily, 35, is a graphic designer who freelances from home. We've been married for 9 years, together for 12. Our life was comfortable. 2-story house. No kids yet. A golden retriever named Max, and a rhythm that felt unshakable. Emily was my anchor. Sharp-witted, with hazel eyes that crinkled when she laughed, and a quiet beauty that still turned heads. I trusted her implicitly. Maybe that was my first mistake. Started subtly, like a crack in a foundation you don't notice until the walls buckle. 6 months ago, she began spending more time on her phone. She'd smile at the screen, her fingers tapping out messages with a speed I hadn't seen before. "Client stuff," she'd say when I asked, her voice light but clipped. I didn't press. I'm not the jealous type, or wasn't, back then. Work kept me busy. A new bridge project had me pulling late nights at the office, sketching load-bearing beams while she worked downstairs in her studio. We'd always been independent, thriving in our own spaces. That's what made us strong, I thought. But then came the first real sign. One evening, I got home early, around 6 p.m., and found her on the back porch, laughing into her phone. She didn't hear me approach. "No, he's still at work," she said, her tone conspiratorial, almost playful. "I'll call you later." She hung up fast when she saw me, her face flushing. "Just a friend," she muttered, brushing past me to start dinner. I stood there, the autumn air chilling my skin, wondering who he was. Me? Someone else? I didn't ask. I should have. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling. She started meeting clients more often, late afternoons at coffee shops or her friend Lisa's place. She'd come home with a distracted energy, her hair slightly mussed, her excuses vague. "Lisa's helping me with a pitch," she'd say, or, "the client wanted revisions." I nodded, swallowing the unease. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband who checks her phone or tails her car. But the doubts grew roots. One night I couldn't sleep. Emily was downstairs, supposedly working. I crept to the landing and heard her voice. Soft, intimate, not the tone she used with clients. "I can't stop thinking about it," she whispered. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overreacting. But the next day, I found a receipt in her coat pocket. A boutique hotel downtown, 2 nights earlier, when she'd said she was at Lisa's. The timestamp was 3 p.m. I'd been at the office calculating stress loads while she, what? I held that receipt for an hour, staring at it, my mind racing. That's when I knew something was wrong. Really wrong. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed proof, something concrete to hold up against her lies. I'm an engineer. I deal in facts, measurements, things I can see and touch. So I started watching. Emily didn't suspect a thing. She'd kiss me goodbye each morning, her lips warm but perfunctory, then dive into her day. I'd head to work, but my focus was shot. Blueprints blurred into questions. Who was she meeting? Why? I decided to dig. First, her phone. She kept it locked, but I knew her habits. One night, she left it charging in the kitchen while she showered. I'd seen her unlock it before. Her passcode was our anniversary, 0928. My hands shook as I typed it in. The screen opened, and I scrolled her messages. There it was, Chris. No last name, just a string of texts stretching back months. "Missed you today," one read. "Can't wait for Thursday," another. My chest tightened. Thursday was tomorrow. I clicked deeper. Photos, nothing explicit, but intimate. Her in a low-cut dress I didn't recognize, smiling at the camera. Him. A selfie of a guy with dark hair, stubble, maybe mid-30s, grinning like he'd won something. I didn't know him, but I hated him instantly. There were plans too. Hotel again? 2 p.m. Her reply, "Yes, please." My vision swam. I put the phone back before she came downstairs, her hair damp, humming like nothing was wrong. The next step was her laptop. She used it for work, synced to her cloud. I waited until she left for a client meeting the next day, Thursday. I called in sick, sat at her desk, and guessed her password. Max's birthday. It worked. Her email was a mess of design drafts, but buried in a folder labeled personal were receipts. Hotel bookings, restaurant tabs, even a lingerie purchase from a shop I'd never heard of. All paid with her business card, our joint account. My money funding her betrayal. I tracked her that afternoon. Installed a GPS app on my phone. Linked it to hers weeks earlier for safety. She didn't know. The dot moved downtown, stopped at the Marriott. I drove there, parked across the street, and waited. At 2:17 p.m., she walked in, arm linked with a guy matching the selfie, Chris. They laughed, her head tipping toward his shoulder. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. They didn't come out for 3 hours. I didn't need to see more. I didn't sleep that night. Emily came home at 7 p.m., claiming traffic delayed her. She smelled like lavender, not her usual citrus scent. I nodded, played along, but inside, I was forging something cold and deliberate. Revenge. Not the yelling, plate-smashing kind. I'm not built for that. Mine would be calculated, a slow collapse she wouldn't see coming. Like a bridge failing under its own weight. First, I needed to know Chris. I pulled his face from her phone, ran it through a reverse image search. Took hours, but I found him. Christopher Allen Tate, 34, a real estate agent from Seattle. LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram full of smug gym selfies. Divorced, no kids, recently moved to Portland. His posts bragged about new adventures and fresh starts. I wondered if Emily was one of them. His office was downtown, a sleek glass building. I memorized the address. I started small, called his office the next day, posed as a client. Chris isn't in, the receptionist said. He's showing a property this afternoon. Perfect. I drove by Emily's meeting spot, a cafe she'd mentioned, and saw them. Her hand brushed his across the table. My jaw clenched, but I stayed calm. Took photos from my car, timestamps and all. Evidence. Back home, I dug into our finances. Her business account had unexplained withdrawals, hundreds here, thousands there. Hotels, dinners, gifts. I traced one to a jeweler. She'd bought a watch, engraved, "To see, always. Not for me." I found it in her drawer, still boxed, waiting. My hands itched to smash it, but I didn't. It was leverage. I hired a private investigator, too. A guy named Paul, ex-cop, gruff but discreet. "Give me a week," he said. I gave him Chris's name, Emily's schedule, everything I had. "This ain't my first rodeo," he grunted, pocketing my deposit. I didn't care about the cost. I needed details, where they went, what they did, how deep this ran. I wanted her world mapped out before I tore it down. Paul delivered faster than promised. For days later, he slid a folder across my desk at a diner outside town. "Your wife's been busy," he said, sipping coffee. Inside were photos, Emily and Chris at the hotel, a park, his apartment. Time-stamped logs of calls, dozens a week. Even audio, grainy but clear. Her voice, laughing, promising him more time soon. My stomach churned, but I kept my face blank. "Anything else?" I asked. Paul smirked. "He's got a girlfriend. Blonde, young. Doesn't know about your wife. That was a gift." Chris was playing both sides, Emily and this other woman. I could use that. Paul handed me the girlfriend's name. Sarah Jennings, 26, a yoga instructor. Her Instagram was public, full of serene poses and captions about trust. I almost laughed. She'd be my first domino. I started with Emily's world. She loved her career. Her designs won awards. Her clients adored her. I called her biggest one, a local ad agency, pretending to be a colleague. "Emily's taking a break," I lied. "Personal stuff." They sounded disappointed but understanding. I emailed 2 more clients from her account, hacked it with her laptop, canceling projects with vague apologies. She'd notice soon, but not yet. Then Chris. I found his real estate listings online, all high-end condos. Posed as a buyer, booked a showing. Met him at a swanky penthouse downtown. He was slick, gelled hair, 2 white teeth, handshake too firm. "Looking for something special?" he asked. I smiled. "You have no idea." I wasted his afternoon, asked endless questions, then ghosted. Planted a seed of doubt with his boss later, an anonymous call about unprofessional conduct. Small cuts, but they'd bleed. At home, I kept up the act. Cooked dinner, asked about her day. She rambled about a stressful pitch, oblivious to my moves. That night, she showered, and I slipped the watch into her purse. Unboxed, like she'd meant to give it to him. Let her explain that to Chris. Let the cracks widen. Sarah was my opening. I messaged her from a burner account, pretending to be a friend of Chris's ex-wife. He's not who you think, I wrote, attaching a photo of him and Emily at the park, her arm around his waist. No reply for hours. Then, who is this? I didn't answer. Left her to stew. 2 days later, Chris's Instagram went quiet. No more gym flexes. Good. Trouble in paradise. Emily felt it too. She came home rattled one evening, muttering about a misunderstanding. I played dumb. Client trouble? She nodded, distracted. I knew better. Paul's latest report confirmed it. Chris had canceled a hotel meetup. Sarah must have confronted him. I pictured the scene, her yelling, him scrambling, and smiled into my coffee. I hit her career harder. Forged a complaint from her agency client. Emailed it to her from a spoofed address. Unreliable, it read. Missed deadlines. She spent hours on the phone the next day, voice tight, pleading her case. I overheard, I don't know what happened. Her panic was music. That night, she cried in the bathroom, thinking I couldn't hear. I didn't comfort her. Chris's turn again. I mailed his boss printed screenshots. Emily's texts, hotel receipts, labeled your agent's side hustle. Anonymous, untraceable. Paul said Chris got called in the next day, left red-faced. His listings dropped online within 48 hours. I wasn't done. Found his car, a black Audi, at his apartment. Keyed it, deep scratches spelling liar across the hood. Petty, sure, but satisfying. At home, Emily unraveled. Her phone buzzed less. She snapped at me over nothing. Burnt toast, Max's barking. I stayed calm. Asked, everything okay? She glared. Fine. It wasn't. I'd lit the fuse. Now I'd watch it burn. Emily's unraveling became a spectacle I couldn't look away from. She'd always been composed, the kind of woman who could charm a room or sketch a logo in an hour. Now, she was a mess. Snapping at me 1 minute, staring blankly at her laptop the next. Her phone stayed silent for hours at a time. A stark change from the constant buzzing of Chris's messages. I knew why. Sarah's confrontation had rattled him, and my anonymous gift to his boss had tightened the noose. Emily didn't suspect me yet, but she felt the walls closing in. I kept the pressure on. Her career was her pride, so I chipped at it more. Using her laptop, I sent typo-riddled emails to her remaining clients, unprofessional gibberish about delays and personal emergencies. One replied, furious, canceling a contract worth thousands. She found out that night, slamming her coffee mug on the counter. They're dropping me, she yelled, eyes wild. I feigned concern. What happened? She didn't answer, just stormed off. I smiled into the sink as I washed the dishes. Chris wasn't faring better. Paul tailed him. Reported he'd been arguing with Sarah outside a bar, her voice shrill, his hands flailing. The Audi scratches had him paranoid. He'd parked it in a garage now, but I'd already moved on. I found his real estate license number online, filed a fake complaint with the state board, claimed he'd misrepresented a property to a client, me. Didn't matter if it stuck. The investigation would drag him through the mud. Paul grinned when I told him. You're a cold one, he said. I didn't disagree. At home, I planted more seeds. Left the hotel receipt from months ago on the kitchen table, crumpled like I just found it. Emily froze when she saw it, her face paling. Where'd this come from? She stammered. I shrugged. Found it in the laundry. You tell me. She mumbled something about a work trip, but her hands shook as she tossed it in the trash. I let it hang there, unspoken, a guillotine blade above her head. The next day, I called Lisa, Emily's supposed alibi. Haven't seen her in weeks, Lisa said, confused. She's been weird lately, though. I thanked her, hung up, and waited. Emily came home late, claiming Lisa had hosted a girls' night. I nodded, then casually mentioned, Lisa says hi. Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she recovered. Oh, right, she muttered. She knew I was onto something. She just didn't know how much. Emily started avoiding me. She'd leave early, come back late, her excuses thinner each time. Client emergencies, she'd say, or I needed air. I didn't argue. Let her think she had space to maneuver. She didn't. Paul's latest report showed her meeting Chris at a dive bar, short, tense. No laughter this time. Sarah had dumped him, Paul said, and Emily was his fallback. I wondered if she knew she was second choice now. Didn't matter. She'd feel it soon enough. I hit Chris where it hurt most. His ego. Hacked his Instagram. Guessed his password from old posts. His dog's name? Pathetic. And posted a selfie of him and Emily. Captioned, caught in the act. Tagged Sarah. Within hours, his followers, clients, colleagues were commenting, speculating. He deleted it fast, but screenshots spread. Paul sent me one, smirking through the phone. He's losing it, he said. I pictured Chris sweating, refreshing his feed, and felt a dark thrill. Emily's clients kept dropping. I'd escalated, forged a scathing review on her portfolio site, claiming she'd ghosted a project. Her inbox filled with complaints. I saw her scroll through them one night, tears streaking her face. I don't understand, she whispered. I rubbed her back, murmuring, it'll work out. My touch was a lie, and she didn't pull away. That stung more than I expected. Her trust, still there, even as I dismantled her. I mailed Sarah next. A printed photo of Emily and Chris, hotel keycard slipped in the envelope. No note, just the evidence. She'd already left him, but I wanted her to twist the knife. She did. Paul said she'd shown up at Chris's apartment, screaming, tossing his clothes onto the lawn. Neighbors filmed it, viral by morning. Emily saw it too. Her phone lit up with a call from him, but she didn't answer. She looked haunted, pacing the kitchen. I watched silent, waiting. That night, I left the watch on her pillow. She found it after her shower, gasped, and stared at me. Where'd you get this? She demanded. Your purse, I said flatly. Guess it wasn't for me. She opened her mouth, closed it, then fled to the guest room. The door slammed. I didn't follow. The trap was tightening. Emily broke the next morning. She came downstairs, eyes red, hair tangled, and tried to explain. It's not what you think, she started, voice trembling. Chris is just a friend, a client. I cut her off. Don't. My tone was ice, and she flinched. I didn't need her lies anymore. I had the truth in photos, receipts, timestamps. She didn't know how much, but she sensed the shift. Daniel, please, she whispered. I walked out, left her standing there. Chris was next. His real estate career was crumbling, license under review, clients bailing. I pushed harder. Found his ex-wife on Facebook, messaged her from a fake account. He's at it again. Attached a photo of him and Emily. She replied, livid, promising to make him pay. Paul said she called his office, raging about unpaid alimony. His boss suspended him that afternoon. I imagined him alone, phone dead, walls closing in. Good. Emily's world shrank too. Her last big client, a boutique chain, fired her after my fake complaint hit their inbox. She spent hours on calls, begging, but they were done. I overheard, "We trusted you, Emily." She hung up, sobbing, and didn't leave her studio all day. I cooked dinner, her favorite, pasta with pesto, and left it outside her door. She didn't touch it. The gesture wasn't kindness. It was mockery. I struck Chris again. Mailed his landlord an anonymous tip. Claimed he was subletting illegally. Paul confirmed an eviction notice went up days later. He moved to a cheap motel, Audi-towed for unpaid tickets I'd reported. Sarah's viral meltdown had tanked his reputation. Now he was broke, homeless, scrambling. I pictured Emily finding out her lifeline cut. She didn't deserve one. That night, she tried again. Knocked on my office door, voice small. "Can we talk?" I let her in, sat silent as she rambled. Half-truths about stress, loneliness, Chris being a mistake. She didn't mention the hotel, the watch, the lies. I stared until she stopped. "I know everything," I said. She froze, then fled. The guest room door locked. I didn't care. The end was coming. Emily stopped pretending. She packed a bag the next day, said she was staying with Lisa. "I need space," she muttered, avoiding my eyes. I didn't stop her. Lisa wouldn't take her. Paul confirmed she'd cut ties after my call. But Emily didn't know that yet. I watched her drive off, then got to work. Her exit was my signal. I drained our joint account first. Transferred every cent, her business earnings, my savings, into a new one she couldn't touch. She'd notice soon, but not before I locked her out. Changed the locks on the house too, left her keys useless. Max stayed with me. She didn't even ask for him. That hurt oddly, her abandoning him like she'd abandoned us. Chris was a shell now. Paul trailed him to the motel. Caught him arguing with the clerk over late payment. I sent his ex-wife more ammo. Texts proving he'd lied about his income. She sued him that week, garnished what little he had left. His motel kicked him out. Paul saw him sleeping in the Audi, unshaven, defeated. I wasn't done. Hacked his email. Sent his client list a confession. Admitted he'd misled them. Signed his name. His career was ash. Emily called that night, voice shrill. "The account's empty. What did you do?" I stayed calm. "What did you do, Emily?" She hung up, probably realizing Lisa had turned her away. Paul said she'd checked into a cheap hotel. Ironic, given her history. I mailed her clients a final blow. A leak of her affair. Framed as a whistleblower's tip. Her reputation tanked overnight. She was alone, broke, disgraced. I sat in our quiet house, Max at my feet, and felt the weight lift. Not joy, satisfaction. They'd built their betrayal. I'd engineered its collapse. But I wasn't finished. The cruelest cut was still to come. Emily tried to come back. Showed up 2 days later, pounding on the door, her bag slung over her shoulder. "Let me in, Daniel," she shouted. I watched through the peephole, her mascara streaked, hair wild. I didn't open it. "You don't live here anymore," I called. She cursed, begged, then left. Paul said she'd crashed with a distant cousin, her last lifeline. I didn't care where she went. She'd lost everything. Home, career, dignity. Chris hit rock bottom too. His ex-wife's lawsuit cleaned him out. The state revoked his license. I mailed Sarah one last photo. Him in the Audi, sleeping, captioned, "Your prince." She posted it online, mocking him. His old clients piled on, his name a punchline. Paul caught him panhandling downtown, unshaven, eyes hollow. I drove by once, saw him myself. Our eyes met. He didn't know me, but I knew him. I kept driving. I sold the house. Didn't tell Emily, just listed it, packed up, moved to a condo across town. The realtor asked about her. I said she'd moved on. Half true. The sale cleared fast, cashed out her share, donated it to a shelter. She'd get nothing. Changed my number too, cut every tie. Max adjusted quick. We walked the new neighborhood, his tail wagging. I started sleeping again. The final strike was public. I'd saved the best evidence, hotel footage Paul had bribed from a clerk. Edited it down. Emily and Chris, laughing, checking in. Uploaded it to a local gossip site, anonymous, titled Portland's Cheating Hearts. It spread, her old clients, friends, family saw it. Lisa texted me, shocked. I didn't reply. Emily's cousin kicked her out after that, Paul said. She vanished, rumor was a shelter downtown. Chris left town, no trace. I rebuilt. New job, new life. Friends asked about her. I shrugged, said, she made her choice. They didn't push. The revenge wasn't loud or messy. It was precise, total, a demolition I designed to last. They'd betrayed me in shadows. I'd buried them in light. And I walked away free. The condo felt sterile at first. White walls, hardwood floors, no trace of Emily. Max padded around, sniffing corners, adjusting to the silence. I liked it that way. No reminders of her laughter, her perfume, her lies. I'd shipped her stuff to storage, clothes, art supplies, that stupid watch, paid a year in advance, then sent her the key. Let her figure it out. She didn't call, didn't text. My new number stayed quiet, and I kept it that way. Work steadied me. The bridge project wrapped up, clean lines, solid steel, a thing I could trust. Colleagues congratulated me, asked about the move. Fresh start, I said, and they nodded, sensing the wall I'd built. I didn't mention Emily, didn't need to. The gossip site video had done its work. People whispered her name, not mine. I'd heard she'd tried calling old clients, begging for jobs. They hung up. Her portfolio site was offline, her career a ghost. Chris surfaced briefly. Paul, still curious, tracked him to a rundown suburb an hour south. He'd taken a job at a car wash spraying hubcaps for minimum wage. The Audi was gone, repossessed, Paul guessed. I didn't care enough to confirm. His Instagram was dead, his name mud online. Someone had posted the panhandling photo again. Comments ripped him apart. I scrolled it once, felt nothing, closed the tab. Emily's family reached out. Her mom emailed, polite, strained, asking what happened. I replied with a link to the video, no words. She didn't write back. Her brother called, left a voicemail. You didn't have to destroy her. I deleted it. They'd enabled her excuses too long. Let them choke on the truth. I wasn't their fixer. I wasn't anyone's anymore. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit on the balcony, Max at my feet, staring at the city lights. The revenge had been surgical, every move planned, every outcome predicted. But the quiet after, that was uncharted. I didn't miss her, not really, just the version of us I'd believed in. That was gone before I'd even known it. I poured a whiskey, sipped slow, and let the past settle like dust. A month later, Paul called. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Emily had surfaced, working a register at a gas station, hair dyed brown, eyes dull. She looks rough, he added. I pictured her scanning candy bars, hands trembling, no sketchpad in sight. And Chris? I asked. Dropped off the map, Paul said. Probably couch surfing somewhere. I thanked him, hung up, and felt a flicker of something, vindication. Maybe, not joy. That was too far gone. I tied up loose ends. Sold her wedding ring. Rose gold, simple, a lie she'd worn daily. Got a decent price, donated it to a veterans group. Her business card, still in my wallet, went into the shredder. The storage unit key came back, returned to sender. She hadn't claimed her things. I canceled the lease, let them auction it off. Whatever she'd left behind wasn't mine to carry. Friends invited me out. Dinners, beers, cautious attempts to pull me back. I went, smiled, talked shop. They didn't ask about her anymore. The video had answered everything. One guy, Mark, clapped my shoulder. You're better off, he said. I nodded. He didn't know the half of it, how I'd orchestrated her fall, how I'd savored it. That stayed mine. I checked the gossip site one last time. The video had cooled, but comments lingered. People calling her shameless, Chris a loser. Someone claimed she'd been spotted begging downtown. I doubted it, but the image stuck. Emily, humbled, broken by her own choices. I shut the laptop, walked Max, let the cold air clear my head. The plan was done, but the echoes kept playing. That night I dreamed of her. Not the real Emily. The one I'd married, laughing in a sundress, eyes bright. Woke up sweating, Max whining at my side. It wasn't regret, just a ghost, taunting me. I got up, made coffee, watched the sun rise. The day stretched ahead, clean and mine. She showed up 6 weeks later. I was unloading groceries. Max barking at a squirrel, when her car pulled into the condo lot. Older, dented, not hers. She stepped out, thinner, brown hair limp, wearing a coat I didn't recognize. Daniel, she said, voice small. I froze, bags in hand, staring at the stranger who'd been my wife. Max growled. I hushed him. What do you want? I asked, flat. She shifted, eyes darting. I need help. I've got nothing left. No apology, no explanation, just a plea. I set the bags down, crossed my arms. Not my problem. Her face crumpled, but she pressed on. You took everything, my money, my house, my work. I'm living in a motel, Daniel. Please. I laughed, sharp and cold. You took everything first. Chris rang a bell. She flinched, looked away. That's over. He's gone. I messed up, I know. But I cut her off. You don't get it. This isn't fixable. She stepped closer, desperate. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance. I saw it then. The old Emily trying to charm her way back. It didn't work. I picked up the bags, turned to the door. Go beg somewhere else, I said. She grabbed my arm. I shook her off. You're heartless, she spat. I met her eyes, steady. You made me this way. She stood there, trembling, as I walked inside, locked the door, heard her sob, then the car engine sputter away. Max whined. I scratched his ears, let the silence settle. Later, I found a note slipped under the door. I'm sorry, it read, her handwriting shaky. I tore it up, tossed it out. Sorry didn't undo the hotel, the watch, the lies. She'd come crawling back because she'd hit bottom, not because she'd changed. I wasn't her savior. I was her reckoning. Word spread. A coworker mentioned it first. Emily had been arrested. Shoplifting, of all things, at a grocery store near her motel. Caught stealing bread, a cheap bottle of wine. She'd pled guilty, got probation, a fine she couldn't pay. Paul confirmed it, sent me the mugshot. Her eyes were empty, face gaunt, brown hair stringy. I stared at it, felt nothing. She'd built that cell long before the cuffs. Chris resurfaced too. A news blip, drunk and disorderly at a bar south of town. Punched a guy, got hauled in. No bail, no one to call. Paul laughed when he told me. Your handiwork's still kicking, he said. I didn't reply. Their falls weren't my doing. They'd lit the match. I just fanned the flames. But I'd made sure they burned. I finished erasing her. Donated the last of her art sketches I'd found in a box to a thrift shop. Changed my email. Blocked her family's numbers. The condo was mine now. New furniture. Max's toys scattered. No trace of her. I started running again. Mornings along the river. Breath fogging in the chill. Life felt lighter, sharper, like I'd shed a skin. The gossip site faded, but their story didn't. A former client emailed me, recognized my name, asked if it was true. She ruined herself. I wrote back. He didn't reply. Her cousin posted online. Vague, pitying, claiming she'd lost her way. I didn't comment. Let them mourn the Emily they'd imagined. I knew the real one. One night I burned the last photo. Us at the coast smiling years ago. Watched the flames curl it to ash. Max slept by the fireplace, oblivious. The past was gone, and I was done carrying it. They'd betrayed me in secret. I'd undone them in plain sight. The scales balanced. Spring came. The condo bloomed with light. Max chasing sunspots. Me sketching freelance designs on the side. Work promoted me, lead engineer, a new project downtown. Colleagues toasted me at a bar. I smiled. Meant it. Life moved forward, steady, mine. Emily and Chris were shadows now, footnotes I didn't read. Paul checked in one last time. She's off the grid, he said. Heard she left town. Him too. Jail spat him out. No one knows where. I shrugged. Good riddance. He chuckled, wished me luck. I didn't need it. I'd built this, every beam, every brace, and it held. I met someone. Casual, a barista, Jen, with a dry laugh and no baggage. We talked over coffee, walked Max together. Nothing heavy, just a spark. I didn't tell her about Emily, didn't need to. The past stayed buried, and I liked it that way. Jen asked once. You seem guarded. I grinned. Earned it. She didn't push. The revenge was over, but its mark stayed. Not guilt, pride, maybe. I'd taken their world apart, piece by piece, and walked away whole. They'd gambled on me not noticing, not fighting. They'd lost. I saw Emily's face sometimes, in crowds, but it was never her. Just a trick of memory. Chris too, a flicker, then gone. I stood on the balcony one evening, Max at my side, city sprawling below. The bridge I'd designed glowed in the distance, solid, unyielding. Like me, I'd torn down their lies, built something better. They were out there, somewhere, broken by their own hands and mine. And I was here, free, finished. The end was mine to write,